and today is practical class actually, and we will start with determination of organic carbon or organic matter in soil by Walkley and Black method. And after that, we will have a practical on nitrogen estimation in plant samples. And the third one will be soil testing. So I may not cover soil testing in detail, but maybe little bit introduction I will try to give you. And now we start with determination of organic carbon or organic matter in soil. So today's learning objectives are you will learn about the basic knowledge soil about the organic carbon or organic matter and carbon cycle, and then determination of organic carbon in soil, and followed by the reactions of oxidation of soil organic carbon. What happens when we do this practical? So, friends, I cannot overemphasize the role of soil organic matter. All of you understand the value of soil organic matter, and it is one of the most important property of the soil, which influences all sorts of things, chemical, physical, and biological properties of the soil. And it holds water and plant nutrients and support the microbial population. Good soil organic matter is prerequisite for a healthy soil. Total soil organic matter is determined by its ignition and measurement of carbon dioxide evolved. Actually, there are different methods for estimation of soil organic carbon. Basically, we estimate soil organic carbon, and then by getting some factor, we convert it to the soil organic matter. So, but there are two kind of carbons. One may be inorganic carbon, one may be organic carbon. So we call it total or total carbon, total soil carbon. And then total soil carbon can be easily estimated by TOC. You know, some of you might have heard TOC, total carbon analyzer. It it measures carbon dioxide by ignition. You burn the organic matter, burn the soil, organic matter in soil, and then CO2 is evolved. Based upon that, instrument measures the total carbon, and that instrument can also measure inorganic carbon and and organic carbon separately also. So you can get three figures like inorganic carbon, organic carbon, as well as total carbon from TOC. In some of the divisions, TOC is available, like in Saskara, they have TOC. And but for our case, we are more interested in organic carbon instead of inorganic carbon, because it is the active fraction of carbon, this organic carbon. So we normally determine soil organic carbon, and in this there are number of methods, but most commonly used method is Walkley and Black method in India, and many developing countries are still using this Walkley and Black method, and sometimes it is also called as Walkley and Black carbon to soil organic carbon. Uh, However, the rapid chromic and acid oxidation of readily oxidizable soil organic matter is the most popular and practical way of determining. So we will discuss that matter. So now, significance of soil organic matter in different aspects. I think most of the issues have already been discussed with you. The role of soil organic matter in fertility, plant nutrition, and then limits of soil organic carbon. I think you know the in India we have zero point 0.5 to 0.75. Soils which have less than 0.5% carbon are considered as low in carbon or low in organic matter, and zero point 0.5 to 0.75% of organic carbon is your medium, and more than 0.75% is your high carbon, and then you can get organic matter values. And most of the time we discussed about CN ratio in organic materials, and ultimately the carbon is stored in soil mostly in the form of humus. Humus is at a particular point of time generally 50% of the total soil organic matter in soil. So humus is very important, and carbon is sequestered mostly in uh, humus form, or maybe some other forms are also there, like biochar, charcoal, etc. So we know carbon is very important. So most of the students know about the carbon cycle. Carbon cycle is very complicated, where we need to consider the inputs, what kind of inputs are going into the soil, into the ocean. And then we also see output, how it is getting out from the reserves. And in between, several actions, reactions happen. And some carbon bonds form the skeleton for all living things. Everything is made up of carbon. All living things are made up of carbon. And it is second element by weight in the human body. 40% of dry weight in plants is carbon. On an average, 40 to 42% is carbon, and same value is for oxygen. And maybe 6 to 6. Hello? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sir, you want? Yes, sir.
Hello?
Now
Yes,
I
sir.
can hear it.
Okay.
Yes,
You
sir. Yes.
want to say something, you can say. If you like to say
No, sir.
something,
You are not audible at this time.
I'm not audible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh,
Now you are audible, sir.
okay, okay. Thank you. You can stop me. You can stop me if you have any
Yes.
problem, please. Otherwise, there is no purpose of teaching you if you cannot hear it. So please stop me if you any problem comes. So
Yes.
definitely carbon is very, very important, and it forms millions of compounds in the nature. And some are very common, like carbon dioxide. Everybody knows about carbon dioxide. And there are certain precious metals and resources, like your diamonds. It is 100% carbon. Petroleum, natural gas, all these things are made up of carbon. So carbon has very high value. And fourth most abundant element in the universe, this carbon. And now, if you see carbon cycle, I'm partly covering the carbon cycle. So carbon may remain in a particular form for thousands of years. Like reserves, petroleum reserves. We don't know how long they have been in the nature. And it can be transformed into countless variations as it passes through land, water, and atmosphere. Lot of forms it changes to form: methane, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and carbon hydrogen compounds. Variety of compounds it makes. So in carbon cycle, there are three important things you can remember. One is carbon storage, maybe as a sediment, as in soils, as in fossil fuels, and etc. And you would surprise to know that more than 50% carbon in the nature or in the world is in soils. So soils are the biggest store of carbon. And the next part of carbon cycle is carbon transitioning. It is converting from one form to the another in the atmosphere, carbon compounds in plant and animal life, etc. So they are in transition. The process that cause carbon to change form. We need to understand the process by which the form changes. It may be mainly because of photosynthesis, maybe because of respiration, and finally decomposition. This photosynthesis and respiration is done by living things, and decomposition happens for the dead matter. Dead matter is decomposed. And then process of carbon cycle, stage one, photosynthesis and respiration are the key process of the carbon cycle. You understand very well what happens in photosynthesis. In the presence of light, carbon dioxide and water combine in green plants and it makes your carbohydrates. Or carbon is fixed. Carbon is converted from CO2 to organic compounds through the process of photosynthesis, and reverse happen in case of respiration. A living organism break down organic compounds for their energy. They want to take energy and it is converted back to carbon dioxide and water. So these two processes are very, very important in carbon cycle. And the next important is decomposition. Decomposition also a key process of the carbon cycle. It breaks down carbon compounds produced during growth. This decomposition means once your organic matter, which was part of living things, then it becomes dead. Then it is decomposed, and first it is sugars, starch, protein, cellulose, fats, lignin. They follow a sequence for decomposition. It results in energy for macro and microorganism like animals, arthropods, fungus, nematodes, bacteria, etc. They are decomposers. Carbon dioxide and stable organic matter are products of decomposition. Finally, carbon dioxide is produced. And you can see breaking down of carbon compounds. When a plant dies or animal dies, whatever it is, carbon compounds developed during growth are broken down. These compounds decompose at different rates. So sugar and starch are the first to be broken down in the process of decomposition, followed by crude protein, then cellulose and hemicellulose. Fats and waxes are the last, or lignin and phenols are the ultimate. So you can see the complex the compound. If it is very complex, it takes more time. If it is simple sugar or simple starch, they break down early. So this is the sequence of breakdown of organic compounds by the process of decomposition. Now you see, and decomposition varies with the condition also. Sometimes you can have aerobic conditions where there is no shortage of oxygen. In other cases, there may be shortage of oxygen under flooded conditions, submerged condition, or waterlogged conditions. So products may be different. Carbon products may be different for the decomposition under two conditions. For example, under aerobic condition, your carbon dioxide will be produced on decomposition. However, under submerged condition, it may be CO2 as well as methane. Similarly, for nitrogen, which is part of proteins, nitrate may be formed in aerobic soil and ammonium may be formed in anaerobic soil or submerged soil. Similarly, sulfur is also part of certain proteins, and sulfate is produced under aerobic condition, that is also kind of mineralization or decomposition. And then hydrogen sulfide is produced under submerged condition. And also variety of organic acids and alcohols are produced under submerged conditions. So carbon is transformed into organic acids and alcohol under submerged condition or anaerobic conditions. Now it was very simple introduction about the carbon and organic matter. The three processes are important: photosynthesis, respiration, and decomposition, which recycles the carbon, through which the forms of carbon changes. So now we see organic matter in bit 2-4 slides for organic matter. On the basis of organic matter content, soils may be called mineral or organic soils. Soils have been divided into two groups: mineral soils and organic soils. So mineral soils have organic matter up to 30%. From 0 to 30%, soils are called as mineral soils. If it is more than 30%, then soils are called as organic soils. So organic soils, if they contain 30%, 25%, then I think cultivation is very, very difficult. So too much of organic carbon or too less or too little of organic carbon is not useful. You need certain ideal or optimum level of organic matter. Too much is also undesirable. So now, what is soil organic matter? Many of you understand. And at this point of time, I would request you to read this chapter on organic carbon, organic matter from Brady's book, N.C. Brady's book. And for nitrogen also, you can read chapter from Brady's book, Nature and Properties of Soil. That is very good book. And I have also given you last night one small bulletin from FAO, which is very, very student friendly. It has got 95 pages and you can go through it. You will find very, very interesting fact about soil organic matter in very simple language. So this definition I have taken from FAO. So you can see soil organic matter is any material produced originally by living organism, maybe plant or maybe animal, that is returned to the soil and goes through the decomposition process. At any given time, it consists of a range of materials from the intact original tissues. Means if something is not decomposed, but it is in the soil, that is also considered as organic matter of plants and animals, to the substantially decomposed mixture of material known as humus. Means organic matter includes starting from intact original tissues up to the humus level, which are there in the soil. Now, if many times students may be asked, what is organic matter? Suddenly somebody asks, then your response will be matter arising from living matter. Matter arising from living matter is your organic matter. This is the simplest meaning of organic matter. In chemistry or soil science, they can explain it like matter relating to or containing carbon compounds. Anything which contains carbon compounds is your organic matter. This is in chemistry. Otherwise, you can say that organic matter is composed of living or dead biomass. It may include living as well as dead biomass, mainly of the plant origin. Animal origin is also there, microbial origin is also there, but it is mainly of the plant origin. The dead fraction is formed by chemical or biological decomposition of live or fresh organic residues and is usually distinct into the following. So you can see categories of organic matter in soil. There are two categories. One is partially decomposed organic residues or organic matter at various degrees of decomposition. It is not fully decomposed, it is still immature, and in which the morphology of plant material is still visible. So that is partially decomposed organic residues. And next is completely decomposed materials with no traces of the anatomical structure of the original plant material from which they have been formed. Means you cannot recognize or identify that what was the original source of the matter. Then it is completely decomposed material. So there are different people have divided this into their own ways. So one most acceptable way of soil organic matter classification was given by Kononova in 1966 and 1975. So I like this classification more appropriate. So you can see he has divided into two groups. One is unaltered materials. Unaltered material means fresh debris and non-transformed components of older debris. You can easily recognize them. Number two is transformed products, that is humus, bearing no morphological resemblance to the structure from which they were derived, often referred to as humified products, but consist of both humic and non-humic substances and can be of two types. These transformed products are divided further into two classes. One is amorphous polymeric brown colored humic substances which are differentiated on the basis of solubility property into humic acids, fulvic acid and humus. Many of you know about the difference in humic acid, fulvic acid and humus. They are classified based upon their solubility in alkali or acid, etc. So you can see from Brady's book how humic acid is different from fulvic acid or from humus. So this is class 1. Amorphous polymeric means lacking a crystalline structure. There are no crystal, and something without solid form is known as amorphous. And polymer means is a large molecule, macromolecule composed of many repeated subunits, like from glucose to starch. I think polymerization of glucose. So that is the difference between amorphous and polymeric. Number two category is compounds belonging to recognizable classes, such as polysaccharide, they can be identified, polypeptides, altered lignins, etc. These can be synthesized by microbes or can arise from modifications of similar compounds in the original debris. So this is how organic matter, soil organic matter is classified. And you can see different components of soil organic matter and their functions. So this picture again I have taken FAO 2005, the book which was sent to you. So in this case, components of soil organic matter are living organism. They are considered as soil engine, living organism. The another part may be partially decomposed plant and animal residues. That is divided further into two: unaltered material, potential food of organisms, and transformed products, maybe non-humic substances and humic substances. So this is also the way to classify soil organic matter. And you can see the different proportion of organic matters. There are different component or constituents of soil organic matter. So in this case, you can see living organism constitute roughly less than 5%. Fresh residue maybe less than 5%. They are very variable. And then stabilized organic matter, that is humus, is 33 to 50%. But most of the time people say generally that humus is at a particular point of time, it is generally 50% of the total soil organic matter. However, range is from 33 to 50%. then decomposing organic matter, which is still undergoing the process of decomposition, that is 33 to 50%. Means decomposing organic matter and humus, they are almost in equal proportion. And you see very interesting picture from nature and properties of soil. This tells us the typical composition of representative green plant material. For example, if you have green manure, if you have green plants, you have green leaves, you are mixing them in the soil, then you can see how much different components are there, organic compounds are there in this. So for example, on an average, a plant may have, green plant may have 75% water and 25% is the dry matter. Just see the circle number, first circle on the top, then see circle on the left side. So this dry matter, which was 25% of the total green matter weight, is mainly made up of cellulose, which is about 45%. And then lignin. Lignin is your 20%, and hemicellulose is 18%, and protein is 8%, and fats and waxes are just 2%, and phenols are 2%. So these are the main compounds in organic matter. And if you see elemental basis, then in this dry matter, you have about 42% carbon, 42% oxygen, and 8% hydrogen, and 8% ash. So this ash may have all kind of minerals, whatever were there in the plant, and some of the not some. In ash, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen is completely lost. If it is burnt, you get ash, and partly nitrogen, sulfur, and calcium is also lost. But other minerals remain in it. The other day, I was also saying about ash. In villages, people are still cleaning their utensils by using ash. You know, they use ash from their chula, and this ash is actually rich in sodium and potassium, which are the main ingredients responsible for cleaning of your utensils. So ash is still used in our country to clean the utensils. Now you see further very simple table to understand forms of organic carbon, soil organic carbon found in scientific literature. Just giving you some introduction to the subject. So surface plant residues, they are there, which are either above the surface or just mixed in the surface soil. Plant material residing on the surface of the soil, including leaf litter. Leaf litter can also be there, which is on the surface, and crop or pasture material, maybe some fallen stems or leaves or fruits, etc. So far pool category is concerned, this is very fast or labile pool. It can be converted quickly. So decomposition occurs at a time scale of days to years. Of course, days to years, depending upon if it is woody, it may take more time, but if it is succulent, it can be decomposed in, say, 15 days, 20 days time. Next category or next form is buried plant tissues, plant residues. Buried means they are inside the soil. This plant material greater than 2 millimeter size residing within the soil is known as buried plant tissue. And they are again in the labile pool. Labile means it converts to other form easily. Labile pool, decomposition occurs at a time scale of days to years. Then particulate organic matter, semi-decomposed organic material is smaller than 2 millimeter and greater than 50 micrometer or 50 micron in size. It is again labile pool, and decomposition occurs at a time scale of days to years. Then mineral associated organic carbon. I think you know role of humus in soil structure improvement. So humus is combined with clay particles, and that way it improves soil structure, and it is also associated with clays in the soil. A lot of books are there on humus clay interactions or humus clay reactions and so on. So it is well decomposed organic material, is smaller than 50 micron or 50 micrometer in size, that is associated with the soil particles. As it is from the stable pool. Stable pool or decomposition will be very slow. It occurs at a time scale of years to decades. It will take years to decade to decompose this humus. Then the last and important one is restant organic carbon. It is charcoal or charred materials. that results from the burning of organic matter resistant to biological decomposition. And it is very, very passive or recalcitrant, means fixed, almost fixed pool. Decomposition occurs at a time scale decades to thousands of years. That is why people are working on charcoal, so that long-term storage of carbon can happen in the soil. Now we directly go to, this was just in brief, the introduction to the soil organic matter. Now we will see how we analyze it in the laboratory. Of course, it must have been, it will be done by the soil science division also, but I like to have this practical from my side. Molecular and equivalent weight of reagents. I think other day in practical class we discussed how to prepare different kind of solutions. So it is daily business for students who are doing analysis, making solutions. So we must know molecular weight and equivalent weight. Equivalent weight is required when we prepare normal solution, and molecular weight is required when we prepare molar solutions. So molecular weight of potassium dichromate, which is used in organic matter decomposition, Walkley-Blake method 1934, is 294. Equivalent weight of potassium dichromate is 49. Molecular weight of ferrous sulfate is 278, and equivalent weight is 139. Molecular weight of ferrous ammonium sulfate is 392, and its equivalent weight is also 392. So I think I assume that most of the students understand what is equivalent weight, what is molecular weight, and so on. So in this case, we can use either ferrous sulfate or ferrous ammonium sulfate. One of them can be used for titration purpose. This will be used in titration, and there is no difference in result. Either you use ferrous sulfate or ferrous ammonium sulfate, there may not be any difference in the results. And equivalent weight is defined as the mass of a particular substance that can combine with or displace 1 gram of hydrogen or 8 grams of oxygen, used in expressing combining powers, especially of elements. So now how to prepare these solutions or reagents? One normal potassium dichromate is used. One normal potassium dichromate dissolve 49 gram potassium dichromate in distilled water and dilute to 1 liter. And if you want, say, half liter, then you can take the half quantity mixed in water and made volume up to 500 ml. So according to that, you can take the quantity of the substance. 0.5 normal ferrous ammonium sulfate or 0.5 normal ferrous sulfate. So for example, it is ferrous ammonium sulfate, then dissolve 196 gram of ferrous ammonium sulfate in distilled water, add 20 ml concentrated sulfuric acid, cool and dilute to 1 liter. Sometimes you will find that it is not dissolving easily, maybe poor quality material, then yeah, there was some problem. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, there was some
Yes,
break.
sir.
Okay, thank you. There was some break. I don't know why it has happened. Anyway, now after ferrous ammonium sulfate, you have diphenylamine indicator prepared by dissolving 0.5 gram diphenylamine in a mixture of 100 ml concentrated sulfuric acid and 20 ml water. So most of the time, friends, if you go to interview, it is asked that what are the names of the different indicators in different analyses and how they change the color. These are the two very pet questions that you can remember, because you will be analyzing several elements, nutrients, where sometimes we use indicators. So we must know name of the indicator and the color change. So concentrated sulfuric acid. So Here the indicator is diphenylamine, and it is prepared by dissolving 0.5 gram diphenylamine in a mixture of 100 ml concentrated H2SO4 and 20 ml distilled water. Concentrated sulfuric acid is required to make chromic acid. 1.84 is the specific gravity, and concentrated phosphoric acid 85% is required if you are using diphenylamine as an indicator. Sodium fluoride is also required if you are using diphenylamine as an indicator. If you do not use this indicator, then you need not to use concentrated phosphoric acid and sodium fluoride, because other indicator is your 0.25 normal O-phenanthroline ferrous complex indicator. If you use this indicator, then there is no need to add phosphoric acid and sodium fluoride. So this is also ready-made available in the market, this phenanthroline ferrous complex indicator. But if you want to prepare, you can prepare it in the lab by taking 1.485 gram of O-phenanthroline monohydrate and 0.695 gram ferrous sulfate in distilled water and dilute to 100 ml. So this is how you can prepare phenanthroline ferrous complex indicator. Here the color change will be from pale blue to chocolate red. Chocolate red. If you use diphenylamine indicator, then bluish green to green. The color change will be bluish green to green. Now the procedure is very simple. Take 1 gram of soil having passed a 80 mesh sieve in a 500 ml flask. So friend, this uh, I think many of you may not be knowing what is meant by a mesh. 80 mesh, what does it mean? 80 mesh means if you have a sieve, if you have a sieve and you measure 1 inch length, 1 inch length only, just 1 inch length at any place of the sieve, and you count the holes which are there in 1 inch length, 1 inch linear length, then that will be your 80 mesh. Suppose 1 inch length is there, and in that you have 80 holes, and it is 80 mesh. If more than whatever number is there, 150, 140, that is actually number of holes in a linear inch. If you know about baggage in aeroplanes, so it is mostly in linear inch, total of linear inch. The length is measured in inches, the width is measured in inches, and also the height. And make the total of these three, that will be linear inch. That will be linear inch. So here also, you got 1 linear inch means the length, 1 inch length, how many holes are there? That is the meaning of 80 mesh sieve. And similarly, this number, if more the number, finer will be the sieve. Finer will be the sieve. So now you take 1 gram soil having passed through 80 mesh sieve in 500 ml flask. Normally, this conical flask, we take it in conical flask, which is 500 ml. Simultaneously carry a blank. In blank, you will not take soil, but other chemicals, whatever you are adding in the sample, required to be added. Now you add 10 ml of 1 normal potassium dichromate solution. Swirl it like this. You can swirl it by this, like this, gently, so that they two mix together and reaction starts. Add slowly 20 ml of concentrated H2SO4. Mix acid with the soil by rotating the flask gently. Keep the flask for 30 minutes to allow the oxidation to proceed. Now potassium dichromate will react with sulfuric acid to make chromic acid. And this chromic acid is the oxidizing agent. So now add 100 ml of water and 3 to 4 drops of diphenylamine indicator or phenanthroline indicator. Whatever indicator you are using, you add. Now add 10 ml of orthophosphoric acid and 0.2 gram sodium fluoride if diphenylamine indicator is used. Titrate the contents of the flask with ferrous ammonium sulfate solution. End point will be titrate the contents until green color starts appearing. So in the beginning it will be bluish green, and from that it will convert to green color. If more than 8 ml of dichromate are used, The determination should be repeated with lesser amount of soil. Now we can see the reactions, they are important. And you see the first reaction, it is potassium dichromate is K2Cr2O7 plus sulfuric acid, and it makes chromic acid. Chromic acid is very strong oxidizing agent, and plus potassium sulfate. And I can tell you many times when we were a student doing practicals, that time detergents were not available in the labs. So if your detergent are not available, then we used to prepare this chromic acid, and we used to wash our glasswares from chromic acid. So first you take these things, sulfuric acid and this potassium dichromate, and also this chromic. I will not tell you the procedure now because it is not required. And this chromic acid is very, very dangerous. If you wash glasswares, you can burn your hands. It is very, very strong kind of oxidizing agent. So now your chromic acid is made, and then this chromic acid will react with the carbon in the presence of sulfuric acid, and it converts. So now the chromic acid will react with the carbon and the presence of sulfuric acid, and it will convert carbon into carbon dioxide, and then chromous sulfate and water will be formed. And then this carbon is actually in the above reaction is oxidized. Carbon is oxidized and by the chromium, and chromium gets reduced. So valency of carbon has raised up from 0 to 4, and valency of chromium has reduced from 6 to +3. So there is oxidation of carbon and reduction of chromium in this reaction. And then you will be going for titration. What happens in titration? In titration, you titrate the contents against the ferrous sulfate or ferrous ammonium sulfate, whatever you want to take. Suppose in the first reaction, you are taking ferrous sulfate. So this chromic acid, actually we are titrating the chromic acid which was not used, actually not used. And that was, whatever was used, that was equivalent to the carbon present, and remaining could not react to the carbon because carbon was not there. So in this, we estimate the chromic acid which was not used in the reaction. So this chromic acid is titrated against ferrous sulfate in the presence of sulfuric acid, and then chromous sulfate is formed, ferrous sulfate is formed, and water. And then if you take, suppose instead of ferrous sulfate, if you take ferrous ammonium sulfate as titrating agent, then reaction will be number 2, chromic acid plus ferrous ammonium sulfate plus H2SO4, and it again forms the similar compounds, chromous sulfate, ferrous sulfate. Is it ferrous sulfate or ferric sulfate? It is ferric sulfate. Sorry, it is ferric sulfate plus ammonium sulfate and water. So these are the reactions in during the oxidation process and during the titration. Now calculations. Calculations, you can see calculation is ml of 1 normal K2Cr2O7 reduced is equal to blank reading minus sample reading into ml of K2Cr2O7 taken initially. So initially you have taken 1 gram soil, in that you have added 10 ml of potassium, 1 normal potassium dichromate. So this is the 10 initially you have added this, and then divided by blank reading. So hope you understand this kind of calculation. And then we need to see the equivalent weight of carbon. So in the oxidation of organic carbon, the change in valency is from 0 to +4. 0 to +4. From C0 to CO2, it is changes from 0 to 4. Then the equivalent weight of carbon in this oxidation reaction is 12 divided by 4. 12 divided by 4. So it is 3. I think you know the weight of the carbon is 12, and now here valency is 4. So weight is divided by valency, molecular weight or atomic weight, divided by 4, then you get 3. This is the equivalent weight of carbon in this reaction. Thus, 1 ml of one normal K2Cr2O7 will oxidize 3 milligram. It will be equivalent to 3 milligram of carbon, or 3 milligram can be converted into gram by dividing it by 1000, then it is 0.003 gram of carbon. This explains the factor 0.003 used in the calculations. I will show you where this factor will be used. But I want to explain you more about this. So you can see 3 carbon plus 4 chromium, and then carbon valency has increased to plus 4. So you can see, as I told you, formula N1V1 sometimes back. So first of all, we need to calculate the milliequivalent used. So in this case, milliequivalent is equal to normality into volume. Normality is 1. 1 normal K2Cr2O7 we have taken, and volume into volume. And suppose it is S. Because volume we don't know how much K2Cr2O will be consumed. We do not know, but by experiment, by practical, if we found out the value of this value of ferrous ammonium sulfate, we can write it here. So milligram of K2Cr2O7 is equal to S into equivalent weight of carbon. So S into 3. And then you can divide it 3 by 1000, because you want you want to convert it into grams. It is in milligram. When we multiply the normality into volume means milliequivalents. When we multiply milliequivalents with equivalent weight, we get the value in milligram. And then milligram can be converted into gram by dividing it by 1000. So 3 is converted into 0.003. So now you can see this calculation, and it is important also. Many times in your PhD entrance examination, other kind of examination, such kind of numericals come. They will give you value of ferrous ammonium sulfate. So much of ferrous ammonium sulfate was consumed. This was the normality of the ferrous ammonium sulfate, and so on. So many numericals can be made out of it. So now you can see organic carbon in soil percentage. Formula is S. As you remember in the last slide, I have shown you what is S into 0.003. It is the factor into 1.3. So this 1.3 is the factor which is based on 77% of the recovery. It is assumed that this Wakley method recovers only 77% of the carbon. Remaining remains unrecovered by this method. Therefore, you need to enhance, you need to increase it. Recovery is 77%, so 100 divided by 77. So this factor will be 1.3 into 100 divided by weight of soil sample in gram. Here you have taken 1 gram, so you can put 1 gram. So this is how you can get organic carbon in percentage. Then you want to convert it to the organic matter. Then organic carbon multiplied by 1.724. So this 1.724 is based on 58% carbon in soil organic matter. 100 divided by 58, you will get 1.724. So you get the organic matter percentage. So friends, this is just average based on 58% carbon in organic matter. However, this will vary from one kind of organic material to other kind of organic material. So people have questioned it. Many times people have questioned that why exactly 58%. Okay, first you do some correlation analysis. You find out the general factor of a particular soil, this and that. So it is very, very controversial many times. But normally we take 1.724 as a factor, and then you can convert it into organic matter. Now the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line. Fifth line you can see organic carbon gram per hectare. Now you want to convert it into gram per hectare in 0 to 15 centimeter soil. So it is organic carbon in soil gram per kg. You can work out from percentage. Organic carbon gram per kg into 2.24 into 10 to the power 6. This is the weight of 1 hectare soil. 2.24 into 10 to the power 6. Organic carbon, now you can convert it into kg per hectare. So in surface 0 to 15 centimeter is equal to organic carbon in soil gram per kg into 2.24 into 10 to the power 3. Instead of 10 to the power 6, now you have 10 to the power 3. So these are the simple calculations related to organic carbon. Now we will see the functions of reagents. Potassium dichromate, in the presence of sulfuric acid, it makes chromic acid, which is a strong oxidizing agent. So its potassium dichromate purpose is to oxidize the carbon. Now ferrous ammonium sulfate, it is used as a titrant in the titration. Diphenylamine is an indicator which suggests the completion of the reaction, the change in color. Phosphoric acid and sodium fluoride, if you use diphenylamine indicator, then it is necessary to complex the iron. So this finishes this practical, friends. If you have any question on organic matter or organic matter determination, you are free to interact. If you have any doubt, anything in your mind, you want to discuss, you can discuss. So your questions are welcome. Hello? Any question from anyone?
Sir, what are the commonly used mesh sieves and what are its purity percentage?
What are its?
Purity means 20 mesh sieve, I think 40% something, 50% purity.
Actually, I have not gone into the details of this subject, so I don't have much idea about this subject. And maybe some soil scientists can tell us about this in detail. So I cannot comment much on this. I can just say that linear length was not clear to me long before. But now I understand clearly that in 1 inch length, how many holes will be covered? It's simple. It is not actually square. Many people used to say that in 1 linear square inch, something that it is not a square inch. It is just length. So I cannot comment on this much.
Sir, in length 1 inch and in width?
Width is not taken. Width is not taken. Width is never taken. It is just length. I am confirmed. I spent last night two hours to find this solution. So it is just length.
Okay, sir.
Linear means in length. Yeah. So friends, now we start the practical number 2, and I want to tell you that I got little bit of exposure in some advanced lab across the world, and where I learned some techniques of instrumentation and chemical analysis. And today the objective of this practical is to determine the total nitrogen in plant samples, the role of nitrogen in plant growth. I think many of you understand the role of plant growth, role of nitrogen in plant growth. It is necessary part of chlorophyll. It is part of enzymes, proteins, DNA, RNA, and it gives green color to the plant. It promotes tilling in the plant. It promotes leaf area index. Number of roles are being played by nitrogen, and also optimum nutrition of nitrogen encourages uptake and utilization of other nutrients also. So many functions are there. And then we will see the relationship between total gel-dal nitrogen and the crude protein content in different plant tissues. So main purpose is determining the total nitrogen in plant samples, and then we will have some discussion on nitrogen. So this is very general information about soil nitrogen, and it is very critical for you to understand this. Many times I as usually say that you may get some numericals in your entrance examinations anywhere. Such numericals usually come. So now this information is very, very important for you. Total soil nitrogen content ranges from 0.02 to 0.5% in mineral soils. This is the range, most common range. In India, we find 0.01 to say 0.1%, 0.1%. 0.5% is not very common in India. And in organic soils, total nitrogen content may be more than 2.5%. Total nitrogen content decreases with soil depth. We can remember this. Total nitrogen content decreases with soil depth because in the surface soil, in the above layers, you get more of organic matter, and most of the nitrogen is contained in organic matter. Just you have seen that 95% of the total nitrogen is in surface soils in organic nitrogen. Now, just one numerical may come. If nitrogen content in surface soil is 0.1%, then what will be the total nitrogen? So you can calculate it in kg per hectare. 2 into 10 to the power 6 kg per hectare is the weight of the soil, and then you multiply it by 0.1, because 0.1 is given to you, that it is in percentage. Then you can multiply this by 0.1%. So 0.1% means 0.1 divided by 100. You need to remember that 0.1 divided by 100. Then it comes out to be 2000 kg. It is very simple. Now next, now we go to inorganic nitrogen, that is known as mineral nitrogen. Inorganic nitrogen is mostly ammonical nitrogen, nitrate nitrogen, and nitrite nitrogen. The quantity of nitrite at a given point of time is negligible in the soil, and it is toxic also. NO2 is very toxic to the plant. If you increase NO2 content in soil, many organisms, many plants can die. So nature has given nature has given a relief to the plant, that there is not much accumulation of nitrite in the soil. Once nitrites are formed, immediately within seconds they are converted into nitrates. So nitrite is very insignificant. So ammonical and nitrate nitrogen makes your inorganic nitrogen or mineral nitrogen in the soil. It represents 2 to 5% of the total nitrogen. If total nitrogen in soil is, in the above case, was 2000, then inorganic nitrogen, just assume, because range is 2 to 5%, we assume that it is just 4%. 4% of the total nitrogen. Then inorganic nitrogen or mineral nitrogen will be 2000 into 4 divided by 100, because it is 4%. So now it comes out to be 80 kg per hectare. Now next terminology is available nitrogen. What will be the available nitrogen? We have the rating chart for available nitrogen. So that is actually potentially available. So potentially available or available nitrogen includes mineral nitrogen plus readily oxidizable from organic nitrogen. How much can be made available from organic sources to the plant, or how much can be mineralized, how much can be oxidized from the organic fraction. So this is your 1 to 3% of the total nitrogen to be potentially released. Only 1 to 3% of total nitrogen to be potentially released from tropical and humid subtropical soils in a year. This is the range for our case. So suppose we take 3%. Okay, 3% of the total nitrogen will be mineralized. Total organic nitrogen will be mineralized. Now suppose the total was it is 2000. It is a mistake. Instead of 800, you see above it is 2000. So 2000 multiplied by, it's my mistake. You make it 800 as 2000. 2000 into 3 by 100. Then how much it will become? 60 kg. It will come 60 kg nitrogen per hectare mineralizable. So 60 kg can be made available from the organic matter. So now you can add 80 plus 60. This 80 was inorganic nitrogen, ammonical plus nitrate nitrogen, and this 60 kg is released from the organic matter. Then it makes your available nitrogen. So 80 plus 60 is equal to 140. 140 means our soil was low in organic, low in available nitrogen. low in available. So this is how I wanted. I had tried to make relationship between total nitrogen, mineral nitrogen, and potentially available nitrogen. Now, in determination of total nitrogen, you have three steps. One is digestion, means you want to remove the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, or you want to digest the sample, or you want to remove the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen from the plant sample. And then distillation, whatever nitrogen has been there in the sample, you want to distill it in the form of ammonia. And finally, you titrate it against the acid. Acid 0.1 normal, sulfuric acid is used. So in this case, the basic principle is organic nitrogen in sample is converted to ammonical nitrogen by digestion with concentrated sulfuric acid containing potassium sulfate or sodium sulfate that promote this conversion. They are used as catalyst. Ammonical nitrogen is determined from the amount ammonia liberated by the distillation of the digest with an alkali. NOH is used to release the ammonia. Ammonia absorbed in boric acid. So this is the during the distillation, ammonia is absorbed in the boric acid, and this boric acid contains mixed indicator. Mixed indicator is used, and then titration can be done. So reagents are catalyst mixture. You can prepare it. Mixed indicator. The procedure is given 1.1 gram bromocresol green plus 0.07 gram methyl red indicator in 100 ml of 95% ethyl alcohol. Similarly, boric acid solution. This is 4%. 4% boric acid solution. 40 gram boric acid per liter of distilled water. 5 ml mixed indicator. You can add it into the boric acid solution, and 5 ml in each liter, 1 liter of boric acid. Now sodium hydroxide is used to release the ammonia, and 40% sodium hydroxide solution is used, and you can make it 40% means 40 gram in 100 ml. So, but you need to be very, very careful in preparing the sodium hydroxide solution. Because it is very, very dangerous. When you mix water in sodium hydroxide or vice versa, it releases lot of heat. At that time, if a single drop falls at your skin, it will be very dangerous. So it needs cooling period of 10 to 12 hours. When you mix water and sodium hydroxide, let it keep in the lab for 12 to 14 hours at least. And then you can have concentrated sulfuric acid. Salicylic acid is also required. Sodium thiosulfate. These two things are required when you are doing total nitrogen analysis in soil. In plant, it is not required. It is required in soil. And in soil also, when you are having total nitrogen, nitrogen which is in ammonical form, which is in nitrate form, which is in this organic materials, which is organic nitrogen. So all the three nitrogen, if you want to estimate in the soil, then you need to have salicylic acid and sodium thiosulfate. It is required to convert nitrate nitrogen into ammonium form, because main purpose of digestion here is to bring the three forms of nitrogen into the ammonical form. Whatever ammonical form is there in the soil, no problem. It is already existing. If you have nitrate, they need to be converted into ammonical form. If you have nitrogen in organic form, then ultimately it is also required to be converted into ammonical form. So whatever nitrogen is there in the plant sample, whether soil or plant sample, all kind of nitrogen are required to be converted into ammonical form so that it can easily react with sodium hydroxide and liberate the ammonia. So now you see the procedure. Take 0.25 to 0.5 gram finely ground plant sample to pass 40 mesh sieve in a piece of butter paper. You weigh the sample 0.25 to 0.5 gram. If you have more nitrogen percentage, then you take less weight. If you have less nitrogen percentage, you can take more weight. Transfer to 500 ml Jandal flask. Add 25 ml concentrated sulfuric acid. Allow to stand. If nitrate and nitrites are to be included, Then sulfuric acid, you can add 1 gram of salicylic acid and 25 in every 25 ml sulfuric acid. Allow to stand for 30 minutes and then add 5 grams sodium thiosulfate. So it is only in case of soil sample. In plant sample, because in plants you do not have any free nitrate nitrogen or other kind of nitrogen, then it is only 100% is only organic nitrogen in plant samples. But in soil sample, you can use this if you are analyzing total nitrogen. Again, allow to stand for 30 minutes, add catalyst mixture and heat Geldal flask first slowly till frothing continues, and after that heat it briskly. It is in your hand. And then continue digestion for half an hour till digest is clean. So after this 30 minutes, you need to heat it so that your digestion digestion is completed quickly. Continue digestion for half an hour, cool and add 150 ml of water carefully and then cool again. These points are very, very important in lab. You cannot add water immediately after digesting the sample. There is a waiting period, otherwise you will face problem. So let it cool down and then you can add water, and after that also some cooling period is required. You cannot put it directly for distillation. So better to get it cooled down for half an hour. So these are the practical things that you normally learn in the lab. You cannot learn on online classes, but you can learn in practical in the lab. Maybe you will get chance in future. Now, for distillation, add 120 ml of 40% NaOH solution along the sides. Now you know some of you might have seen the distillation procedure. You have a flask and that flask is heated up and it is connected to the boric acid. In between you have condensers which circulates the water for cooling. So this is how distillation works. So add 120 ml of 40% NaOH solution along the sides of Geldal flask, and then you can add few glass beads. Immediately connect to the distillation bulb immediately, otherwise you will lose some ammonia. Collect ammonia evolved in 25 ml of boric acid mixed indicator in a conical flask, and distillation should be continued till 150 ml of the distillate is collected. Titrate, or one can use these litmus papers. Litmus paper can be used. Titrate ammonia evolved against standard sulfuric acid. Here we take 0.1% normal sulfuric acid and run a blank simultaneously with the piece of paper that you have taken in the sample. Now calculations are amount of nitrogen in the sample. This is ml of acid used for sample minus ml of acid used for blank. So you have used certain amount of 0.1 normal sulfuric acid in sample and minus blank, and this is multiplied by normality of the acid into 14 into 10 to the power minus 3. So I think you will record the reading that will be put in ml of acid used for sample. You will also record for blank. So you put those values here into normality of the acid. In this case, normality of the acid was 0.1 normal. So you can put value 0.1 here. So up to here, you see volume, volume of the acid consumed, sample minus blank. So this volume can be multiplied by the normality, that is 0.1. So up to here, you will get milli equivalents. Up to here, you will get milli equivalents. Then you are multiplying it by the equivalent weight of nitrogen. So if you multiply milli equivalent by equivalent weight of a substance, you get the values in milligrams. So up to 14, you will get milligram of nitrogen, which was there in your sample. Now you multiply it by 10 to the power minus 3, then you get the value of nitrogen in grams. So I think you understand this formula, very easy to understand. First is volume into normality of the acid. It gives you milliequivalents. Milliequivalent multiplied by the equivalent weight, which is 14, you get milligram. Milligram divided by 1000, you get grams of nitrogen. So this is nitrogen percentage in sample is equal to S. S is grams of nitrogen. Grams of nitrogen in the sample. into 100 divided by the sample weight, because you want nitrogen in the percentage. So it is 400. Now just some reactions, what happens in the reactions when you are estimating total nitrogen in the soil. So in this case, first you want to trap the nitrates. You want to convert nitrates into ammonical form. So in this case, salicylic acid, you see the first reaction, salicylic acid reacts with the nitrates which are there in the soil sample. So it is written as HNO3. These nitrates are bound with hydrogen. So this makes your nitrosalicylic acid. So now it becomes part of nitrosalicylic acid. And then you have also added this sodium thiocyanate. You remember you also added it. So sodium thiocyanate reacts with sulfuric acid and it forms thiosulfonic acid. Thiosulfonic acid and nitrosalicylic acid will react now. These two compounds will react now. This nitrosalicylic acid and thiosulfonic acid, the third reaction, it gives you H2SO4 and it also gives you aminosalicylic acid. Now aminosalicylic acid has formed. So this nitrogen have been converted, nitrates have been converted into NH2 here in aminosalicylic acid. And this aminosalicylic acid again reacts with sulfuric acid and it produces ammonium sulfate. So now your nitrate have been converted into ammonical form in the soil sample. And now you can see how this organic matter is oxidized by sulfuric acid. Suppose it is glucose, simple molecule, and it reacts with sulfuric acid and your carbon dioxide is lost, your carbon is removed from the sample and water and sulfur dioxide formed. So this is how organic matter is oxidized by sulfuric acid. Now, next is trapping ammonical nitrogen, because the soil samples may also have your ammonical nitrogen and you want to convert that ammonical nitrogen into ammonium sulfate. So in this case, ammonium is present in the soil solution in NH4OH form and it also reacts with sulfuric acid and it forms ammonium sulfate. So you see all kind of nitrogen is converted into ammonium sulfate. Now, digestion of amino acids. How amino acids are digested? This is general formula of amino acid: RCOONH2 plus 2H2SO4 plus H2O, and you get ammonium sulfate. So this is how nitrogenous compounds like proteins or amino acids are converted into ammonium sulfate. So basic purpose of digestion was to get all kind of nitrogen into ammonical form. To get all kind of nitrogen into ammonical form. And now you have seen how nitrates were made into ammonium sulfate, how ammonium hydroxide was made into ammonium sulfate, and how this amino acid nitrogen was converted to ammonium sulfate. So these are the important points to remember. Now you have distillation. What happens in distillation? In distillation, you know this your digested material in the Jindal flask contains all nitrogen in ammonical form, ammonium sulfate. It reacts with NaOH, 4NaOH, and it gives you sodium sulfate. And ammonia is liberated, 2NH3. So this ammonia will pass through the condenser, which cools down it, and ultimately it will travel in the form of ammonium hydroxide, which will fall in the boric acid. And this boric acid reacts with the ammonium hydroxide and it forms ammonium borate. So in the beginning, when you have boric acid solution, it was red in color, generally light red or deep red. It gives you red color. When you mix a mixed indicator in the boric acid, it gives you red color. And once the ammonia starts entering in the boric acid solution, the colors become blue or green, kind of bluish green, something like the different shades of blue and green, mix of blue and green. You will get that kind of color when ammonia enters there. Now you take this ammonia which is there in the boric acid in the form of ammonium borate, and now you are going for titration. And this ammonium borate reacts with sulfuric acid and ammonium sulfate is formed. And and that is the end point of the reaction, where color change will be from blue to red. So again, it will come to the original color of the boric acid. So this is how color change happens. In the beginning, your boric acid was red in color, and then ammonia entered into it, then it became green or blue-green. And then again, when you titrate it against the sulfuric acid, 0.1 normal sulfuric acid, it gives you red color. So this is how color change happens in these reactions. And now, role of nitrogen in plant growth, you know it. CN ratio, you know it. Sulfuric acid, the role of sulfuric acid is, you have seen, in almost each and every reaction, sulfuric acid was involved. So it is mainly oxidation of soil organic carbon or plant carbon to CO2. Sodium sulfate, raising the boiling point of sulfuric acid. Salicylic acid, you understood the role of salicylic acid. It was used to convert nitrates into ammonical form in the soil samples. And then sodium thiosulfate, in the same, it also helped in conversion of nitrate into ammonium. Sodium hydroxide for distillation, for evaporating ammonia, ammonia volatilization. And boric acid, you know, it trapped the ammonia, and standard 0.1 normal solution for titration. Now, so far crude protein is concerned, so fundamentally in plant, why we do the nitrogen analysis, there may be different purposes. One is to see the critical level, how much nitrogen is present in the plant tissue. And many times biochemists or agronomists or soil scientists want to know the nutrient uptake. If you want to know the nitrogen uptake, then you should know the percentage of nitrogen in the sample. And thirdly, if you want to know the crude protein, how much is the protein content, then also you require nitrogen content in plant. So this nitrogen content in plant is estimated for different purposes. One purpose is to see the critical level in the plant tissues, in the green tissues. Number two, to see the nutrient depletion, how much nutrients are removed. And number three is your protein content, to know the protein content. And there may be some other purposes of estimating nitrogen content in the plant tissue. So one is converting it into the crude protein. So you got the factors, because we know that protein contains 16% nitrogen. 16% nitrogen is there in the protein. So you get 6.25 as a general factor. However, this factor will vary from one crop, one plant to another plant. For example, for wheat and barley, it is 5.7. For rice, it is 5.95. For sorghum, it is 5.83. But in the absence of these factors, if you do not have these factors, you can adopt this 6.25. So this is asked in your quiz examination. What is the factor for sorghum, factor for rice? So this factor is actually determined by analyzing a large number of samples and seeing the relationship between protein and nitrogen value. Now, friends, these are the two numericals that you are required to do, and you can do more also. And in organic carbon also, I have given you one soil fertility manual published by Department of Division of Agronomy, IRA. I think I have already given you sometimes back, and you can take some numericals from that. Some practical exercises are there. So all these exercises you need to do in your practical record, which you can do online also. You can type in a Word file and then convert it to the PDF file and then send to me. So these are simple numericals. Like first one is a 0.2 gram wheat grain sample after digestion with concentrated sulfuric acid and distillation with NOH required 3.7 ml of 0.1 normal H2SO4 for titrating the ammonia evolved. A blank carried out required 0.2 ml of 0.1 normal sulfuric acid. Calculate the Geldal nitrogen content in grain sample and estimate the crude protein content in the sample. You can do this numerical, try to do it. If you have any problem, if you fail to do it, you can contact me through email. So I will give you a solution of this numerical. Any problem you have in future, because today is our last day of interaction. Any problem if you have in future, I will prefer email. You send your problems, you send your questions by email.
Sir, not audible.
So anything, if you want to interact with me, email is the best way to interact. I will certainly reply you if you contact me on email for numericals, for any problem, any point of discussion. If you want any literature, anything you have, any problem, you can talk to me through email. This is one. So try to do all these numericals. I've given you this practical manual. In that manual also you got variety of numericals, not just for your exam. These formal exams are nothing, dear. I tell you all. Thing is that we should learn as much as we can. We can. The formal class is also very important, but purpose is learning, not to pass the exam. Exams are just to make you learn. Why we keep or people develop this exam? Just to give you some incentive, inspire you, or force you. But see, one cannot learn by force. It can be learned by your habit. You can make it your habit that I will learn everything. That is the way to learn the thing, and that is the answer also. One time one senior person said that you can bring a horse to the pond, you can bring a horse to the water, but it is not necessary that horse will drink the water. It will depend upon his choice. Water is available. You cannot force a horse to drink the water, something like that. So it depends, all depends upon our attitude. If we want to learn, we can learn. For me, examination has no meaning. Formal examination has no meaning. So don't worry about your marks. So, but you should learn more and more. For assignment, last date was 10th of May, I think, and maybe 4 or 5 people have submitted, and some are doing it. So I request you all to do this job. Now I can extend it up to 20 May. 20 May you do it, but please do it. I encourage you, and those who are interested and can do little hard work, so it can be published. It can be published. I will help you to publish it, so that you will get some publication also. So now I invite your questions, and maybe I will finish after the questions. So because one more exercise is there, soil testing, so that you can go through yourself to that practical exercise. And so your questions from this practical, organic matter or nitrogen estimation, any numerical, anything you want to ask, please do ask, please do interact.